Just to give you a little statistics on Maryland beekeeping, from the 2019 to 2020 beekeeping year, here in Maryland we had 2,100 beekeepers, 2,161, with 2,700 apiaries. In those apiaries combined, we had 15,923. And I've been on a campaign all season of increase your bees, because I really want to say we have 16,000 colonies because I promote beekeeping everywhere I go. We were able to inspect 552 apiaries, and that is myself. I have 3 part-time regional seasonal inspectors. I have 3 gentlemen that work in the outer regions of Maryland to help me. I cover the entire state, so it's a lot of driving. But typically, if I go I'm in the central part, if I go from my house to the shore, it's 3 hours, and from my house to the mountains where we meet, West Virginia, it's 3 hours as well. And then from my house all the way down to the tip of Maryland where we meet Virginia is 3 hours as well. So it's not too bad. It's a lot of driving. In those apiaries, we were able to inspect 4,430 colonies. And the reason we were able to inspect so many colonies is because of our use of the disease detector apiary inspection canines. So the 2 dogs that are trained to detect and alert on American foul brood were able to inspect 2,400 colonies, and those were colonies that were leaving Maryland last winter and heading to California for almond pollination. Most states have a regulation on brood. Once it's found, it's quarantined and eradicated. It is not allowed to move across state lines. So that being said, our law here in Maryland is that in order for someone to leave the state or to come into the state, you must be inspected and to be free of American foul brood. And that's what the dogs do for the commercial beekeepers. It is an important job. It's a small job, but it is an important job. So just to get down to it, maintaining healthy bees is possible. Vigilant beekeeping inspections are required. Knowing what you need to see every time you are in your colony. Healthy brood. I preach it everywhere I go, healthy brood. If you see healthy brood every single time, if you know what you're looking for, you don't have to memorize every disease, every bacteria, every fungus. You don't have to know all the names, or all you have to do is know when you have a problem. And that problem is, I'm not seeing the healthy brood pattern. I'm not seeing the pearly white glistening larva. As soon as you don't see the pearly white, and I say pearly white 1,000 times because it's just something in your mind. As soon as you see a larva that is not white, done. Let's get to the bottom of what it is. There are a handful of things that it could be. It's not always foul brood. American foul brood wouldn't be in the larva anyway. So we can pinpoint, all right, let's do, and I call it a CSI. Let's do a CSI of the colony and figure out what is going on in the colony. 9 times out of 10, it's BPMS, parasitic mite syndrome. That's what I see the most of. But knowing when you have that problem. And as soon as my beekeepers, I tell them all the time, as soon as you see a larva that is not pearly and white, call me, call your mentor, call your club, get somebody out there to look at it, or go through the Honeybee Health Coalition, look through their pictures. You can diagnose it as well. So American foul brood disease is not a huge problem here in Maryland. It is the worst pathogen because it is the most contagious, or it is the contagious bacteria, and we find the smallest problem here in Maryland with American foul brood. Although I have to say that was last year we found 3 colonies confirmed And this year, we're already past that. So this is just going to be the year for it. Most of these things are cyclical, so comes in cycles, and it is what it is. And I'll talk a little bit about why I think that is later. So you can see the rod-shaped bacteria there in the bottom picture. And this gentleman here sitting at the microscope is Samuel Aban, who works at the USDA Beltsville Bee Lab. And I think that's another thing that we are very lucky here in Maryland. We have an awesome bee lab right in our backyard. So right here in Beltsville. He is the one who checks all my samples. So for those who are new and don't know about American foul brood, American foul brood is a spore-forming bacteria. It's called Pentabacillus larva. It is the most widespread, as in it is found in the most places. It's not the most common. It is the most destructive of the brood diseases because of the fact that it's contagious and that it is eradication instead of clearing out. And again, I highlighted bee brood disease because this is not something that you can diagnose by looking at your adult bees. It is not something you can diagnose from the front of the colony. You have to open the colony and look into the frames, into the comb to inspect your bee brood. You can only see the microscope, see the bacteria under a microscope. And it affects the larvae that are up to 3 days old. So that being said, there is a small window. That's one of the reasons why typically we don't see a big amount of American foul brood, because not only does it have to get into the bee bread, it has to be fed to a larva up to 3 days old. Once that larva is 4 days, 5 days, 10 days old, the bacteria doesn't affect the midgut. So we have larvae that are tiny baby larvae. Once that gets fed to them, that's your open window. And it is a small amount of time to get those spores into that larva. So young larvae less than 24 hours are the most susceptible. Again, that's a small window. It's a small window of time. But with brood being reared in the colony all the time, I mean, there's always a window. The spores germinate in the gut of the larva, and the vegetative form of the bacteria begins to grow. So meaning the bacteria feeds off the larva and then taking all the nourishment from that larva. And then once the larva dies, once the larva is ready to pupate in that pre-pupation period, that's when the larva will die, that pre-pupa. And once it dies, the bacteria, the vegetative bacteria, dies as well, leaving behind spores. So if you're a visual person like me, think of, and I don't know if you have them in California, so this might be totally off track. Here in Maryland, we have these mushrooms that after it rains a lot, you get these big fat mushrooms in your yard or in your grass. And if you kick them, it's a big plume of like smoke and dust that comes out of them with spores. So if you can imagine when that larva dies, then poof, we have these spores. One larva that dies from American foul brood can have 100 million spores. So that's not even fathomable to think of something that high in number. So the infected larvae normally die after the cell is capped. So if you look into your colony, you pull that frame and you're looking on both sides and you see khaki colored larvae and they're still in the C stage, not American foul brood. American foul brood happens after the larva already stands up in the cell and then they cap it over. One of the telltale signs of American foul brood is the fact that they've already capped it and then the capping shrunk in because the larva died, and then they pierced the capping to see what was going on. So capping, if you see brown larva, it is not American foul brood. So the vegetative form of the bacteria dies with that larva, but not before it produces those spores. And I actually go over this several times I go over each stage of this several times in this talk, because I feel like saying it a different way just helps you in your mind, realize or see, because most beekeepers in their lifetime will never see this. But it is something you have to keep in the back of your mind, that, of what this is. So again, it only affects the bee larva. You'll never see effect of American foul brood bacteria on an adult bee. Okay, so the takeaway from the definition of American foul brood is that it is a spore-forming bacterium. It is highly contagious. It typically kills the colony left on its own, and it affects the larval stage only. Larva into the pupa, that pre-stage, pre-pupa stage, whatever way you want to call it. Again, here is the pictures that the telltale. This is the sunken cappings. These cappings are not convex. They are starting to concave. They look greasy or wet. They have the pierced holes, which we can see they've chewed open here. The worker bees chewed open and said, hey, why didn't you emerge? What's going on? Everybody else around you emerged, but you didn't. And it's because underneath of that piercing is this gooey mummy here. And you can see here, it's just starting to leave the larval stage and go into the pupa stage. This happens after silken cocoon has been woven. So we can start to see an abdomen, we can start to see a head, and the telltale pupal tongue. And that is in a lot of my photos, because that is a typical sign. When you open that capping, you see the pupal tongue, and you can see it here as well. So again, I'm going to just reiterate, knowing what healthy brood looks like is key. Everybody says, you learn over time, you learn to find eggs, you learn, the different stages. Knowing the life stages of the life cycle of the brood is, if you want to raise queens, if you want to know what's going on in your colony, when's the last time your queen laid an egg, look at that larva. How old is it? You know exactly when the last time she was in there. So, knowing these things is very important, but most of all, healthy white brood, healthy white larva. You can fix a lot of the other issues, but knowing that your larva is healthy is what's going to make your colony thrive. And a good brood pattern. So you can see here the good brood pattern, even if it's a young queen, or even if you don't have the stores, or even if you don't have a nectar flow coming in and your queen isn't laying well, but she's laying a beautiful pattern. The capping is all is even, and nothing is pierced, and no misses. So we can kind of tell, okay, she's doing her job. Granted, she's struggling a little bit, or maybe she doesn't have enough food, or maybe she doesn't have enough workers to take care of that, but what she does have here is healthy. So we know our colony will be thriving. The bottom picture, the large picture, that is an awful brood pattern. So I can pick this apart as to like 5 different ailments that this colony has at this time, but we know this shotgun pattern, the bad brood pattern, all of that is you don't ever want to see this, or I have a problem, I need to call my mentor, I need to call somebody to help me figure out what this is and how to fix it. Most of all the issues are fixable. So if we see the pierced cappings, like we saw here in this photo, we see the pierced cappings. The next step is to see if it's ropey and to see if it smells. To me, American foul brood smells like poultry barn and dead animal, like roadkill on a hot day, something nice and aromatic. And so you can take a matchstick or a twig, you put it into the cell, you kind of stir it up, and when you pull it out, it'll rope. It's sticky and gooey. And we can see here, these actually, this one here with the rubber glove, this was from this year that we took samples, and I was able to get the photo. So again, we see the brown ropey, and to me, it smells very stinky. So from here, once we see this, we are at the cusp of vegetative state and moving to scale. Scale is what we call, once that larva fully dies, down into the wax, into the cell or into the comb. It leaves behind its own mummy, or they call it scale, because it looks like the scale of a fish. So in this frame, if you were to pick up the top bar of your top bar of your frame and tilt it towards you, and you're looking down into the bottom, so the larva was in here and then it just souped down into that dead larva, this is where we would have spore. So when I talk a little bit later about cleaning up the colony, at this point in scale, where we already know scale has the spore, this is not clean upable. And I apologize for the words that I make up. It's just who I am. So we can't clean this up. This is burnable. This is very serious. But if we were to go into a colony and see 2 or 3 on one frame, we saw 2 or 3 little pierced cappings, and we're still in ropey, and we're still in the vegetative state, pull the frame, gently get all the bees off, burn that frame, keep the colony, and keep an eye on the colony. Get ahead of it, because that frame is what, $1.25? Let it go. But this right here, this is the colony. This is the woodenware. This is all of it. Because at this point we know 100 million spores have blossomed out of each of these scale. We're done. That's not, you can't clean that up. You're shooting yourself in the foot if you think you can clean this up or keep it in your apiary or just throw away this frame. No, it's there. So in order to keep yourself clean, and again, I'm talking from experience, you got to let some of that go. Okay, so scale is the way where we're talking about the spore form. The spore is already alive there. That final state is a dark brown scale, like a fish scale. It's on the lower side of the cell, and it is very hard to remove. So there are other ailments like say snot brood or some other idiopathic brood disease that looks like this, and then it looks like it has kind of souped down or mummied down to the thing, to the cell wall, but it's easily removed. And that's the difference. That sticky gooey, this versus the other that's just dead larva. And it is totally a different, it's a different monster. So if death occurs there at the pupal stage, the tongue may protrude from the scale. Sometimes you still see that pupal tongue from the scale. These were samples that we also took from earlier this season. And the beekeeper chose to do a field test, the Vita field test. I have nothing wrong. I don't have any qualms about the Vita field test. I'm cheap, and I refuse to use money when I know the Beltsville Bee Lab can do it for me for free. So, but they did the Vita field test, and it did come up positive. And you can see the telltale signs of the pierced cappings here, and then you can see the roping that was here. And when I say roping, it's sticky, and when you pull the stick out, it sticks to it and then snaps back. Okay. So how does it spread? It spreads by robbing bees, carrying the spores back to their hive, because bees, you know, we all know they live to serve the colony. And if that means I need to fill this colony with food so we have enough to get through the winter, I will take it from wherever I can take it from. So if that means I can smell food next door at the weak colony right over here, I'm going to take it. Or at the neighbors, or you know, somewhere else, they're going to bring it back, whether it's from a nectar source or whether it's stolen. It is their nature. So how else does it spread? It spreads by buying used equipment. I know that. It happened to me. So that being said, also know that it can be when you buy a nucleus colony. So if you are buying a nucleus colony from someone you don't know, ask for it to be inspected. Ask to see the inspection report. Obviously, if it's somebody you know, you're friends with, if it's your mentor, no, it doesn't have to be inspected. Although, that being said, here in Maryland, it must be inspected to cross state lines. So if you bought and here we touch so many states, if you buy a nuke out of West Virginia, in order to bring it here into Maryland, it has to be inspected first, or vice versa. In order to sell a nuke from Maryland into West Virginia or Pennsylvania, Delaware, Virginia, it must be inspected to cross state lines, and that is to keep this right here from moving. So know what robbing bees looks like, and discourage robbing at all costs. For the newbies that don't know what robbing looks like, I explain robbing as when bees try to get into the colony in places that you're not supposed to, they don't live there. So bees that live there, I mean, obviously if you open the colony and some are hanging on the outside and you put the lid back on and they're still hanging there, yes, that's different. But know the difference between this colony, this tall colony here that was opened, was full of honey, and you can see the bees are trying to get in at every crack and crevice, whereas over here, this colony wasn't opened. So all the girls who live here are going in the front entrance like, hey, we know what we're doing. And all these girls are going, I smell honey, give it to me. And so the colony here on the right-hand side of the screen, the small colony, same thing. It had been opened, fully opened, and in a nectar dearth, then that is it. Robbing happens. So know what robbing bees look like and discourage it at all costs. AFB can accidentally be spread by beekeepers or through natural bee behavior, which again is the robbing. Beekeepers, you can spread the bacteria spores when you're infected combs. You give one to your friend, or you're trying to, even in your own apiary, you have a colony that's struggling, or you requeened and you're trying to boost numbers, so you give them capped brood. You can spread it as well. So knowing, again, what it looks like, so you're not moving it into other colonies in your own apiary. So you could put one with AFB right into one that does not have it. Spores can also be spread on tools. So I do recommend that you clean your hive tool and your smoker. And when I say smoker, imagine where your fingers touch. I mean, I use bare hands when I'm inspecting, or rubber gloves when I'm in commercial colonies. When I'm inspecting other people's colonies, I wear latex gloves. In my own, I'm glove free. But anywhere your hands touch. So on the bellows of the smoker, front and back, that's going to be sticky. It's an area where it will have propolis, honey, or wax. Scrape that down, wipe it with some alcohol, keep your tools from being sticky. So alcohol doesn't kill the bacteria. Alcohol doesn't kill the spore. Alcohol kills the places where they could hide. So it takes all the stickiness and all that problem areas off of your tools. So that being said, some type of alcohol is recommended to clean your hive tool. I scrape mine first. I use a scrubby, like a green kitchen scrubby, and get everything off, including the side rails. Make sure that is clean, because if there's propolis there and you're in an infected hive, those spores could stick to that propolis and then it could transfer, albeit that is the least risky way of spreading AFB, is through propolis or whatnot on your tools. But that you should be safe anyway. Anything harvested from a colony that does have AFB will have AFB spores in it, which it doesn't hurt the honey for human consumption. That's fine, or the pollen, but you would never want to feed honey and pollen harvested from hives you don't know to your own colonies. So if you extract honey or if you have honey frames you want to feed back to your own bees, that's great. But don't buy honey from the farmer's market and then feed it to your bees. You have no idea where that came from. So you should never feed honey and pollen from other colonies. Okay, so how do we control it? Controlling is knowing. So we want to make sure it does not get to this state. It doesn't get to the spore state, the scale state. We want it, if you have to have it, catch it while it's in that vegetative state and get rid of it right then and there. We know it hasn't spread. We know nobody's tried to clean it up. We know there's no spores. So you can sterilize your tools, sterilize your hands, ask for inspection prior to buying your nucleus colony or an established colony. It helps you in the long run to burn those frames when you have that vegetative state, to get rid of them right away. If you are living in an area where there's a burn ban, in Baltimore City, you're not allowed to burn on the spot. So we double bag in black contractor garbage bags, and I will even take it to the landfill and have it buried for you, so we can get rid of that. And again, frames are so cheap. It's easier just to cut the ties now and get rid of it, to keep from reinfecting your own apiary. Those frames are so cheap to replace. If you catch it early, you're not replacing your deeps, your mediums, your bottom boards. You're not having to replace all of that. And antibiotic treatment is not an option here in Maryland for AFB. So we don't allow the cleanup of it. We do allow antibiotics to be used once the foul brood is gone. So I personally don't like to see that. I don't like to see any antibiotic put in the colony. But once we get it cleaned up, and once we go through 2 testings of no American foul brood bacteria found, they are allowed to treat, but you have to have a veterinary feed directive in order to do that now. So thankfully, we don't have our commercial beekeepers religiously using the antibiotic or the terapatties as a prophylactic to keep this from happening. And I think that's part of the reason why I said before, why AFB is kind of showing its head this year, is because terapatties have been used religiously, and now they can't get them because you have to have a feed directive to get them now. So I think once you stop using antibiotic, here it is, because it suppresses it, it does not kill it. So we're seeing a little more this year. Adult bees are not affected by AFB, but they can spread the spores again by robbing or drifting in and out of their colony into the next colony. And the spores can remain viable. So know that when you go to the barn and grab Uncle Henry's beekeeping equipment because you want to start beekeeping, you don't know what he had. He probably didn't know if he did have it or not. when bees died off, people just put their equipment in the barn or in the shed. It got stored, and when they found a swarm, they got it back out again. Yeah, don't do that. Start fresh. Give yourself the leg up and start fresh. So the only way to manage the disease is to stop the infection from occurring. You know, best management practices and dealing with it before your colonies become infected. And again, this is, you can see the brown pupae here, a scale. And these are not my photos. These are from the Bee Informed Partnership, because they have great photos and it's all free on the web. So I encourage you to go to the Bee Informed Partnership and the Honeybee Health Coalition. And
I missed it all.
Oh, so here at the bottom of the picture, you can see that the photo credit is Rob Snyder from the Bee Informed Partnership. If you just type into Google Bee Informed Partnership, it's a wonderful web page with bee information, and the Honeybee Health Coalition actually has an interactive website that walks you through how to treat for mites and every treatment that's available and how to use it. Those are the two. I recommend them as much as possible. Again, like I said, I'm going to go over all this stuff. I go over it several times just to, you know, keep it fresh in your brain. You know, the robbing bees, know what it looks like. And if you have robbing bees, what do you do? If you don't have a mentor, you know, or you're trying to read up, you can put a wet towel over the front of the colony, over the whole colony, a wet sheet. And that allows the bees who live there to figure out how to get out and how to use, you know, reduce your entrance down to the best of your ability to the smallest amount. Even if that's shoving grass and mulch, if you don't have an entrance reducer, you can literally use anything to close off the entrance, screen, you know, the towel, the sheet, but you can see here the robbing. You can use robbing screens, you know, just to thwart the robbing sensation. Going through your colonies during a nectar dearth really encourages robbing. So if you cannot do it, you know, of course you always need to, you know, if there's a problem, you need to check your colony, or you need to go in there, be quick about it, and try not to break boxes where there's honey, or burr comb where you're exposing honey. And you can see I have there, that top picture, 2 hive tools. The bottom one has stickiness on it, and I use the little one to scrape the big one, and then I clean them both. You can, at the end of your inspection, drop your hive tool into your smoker and get a little fire going, and you can burn off the propolis and burn off the wax or the honey, or if you would like to do that, that helps. But clearing the hive tool from anything sticky is really, that's what you're trying to do. And for the however many time in this talk, knowing what healthy brood looks like, knowing what that healthy brood pattern. So when you go in and you see that every time, you know, okay, the capping is beautiful. The capping looks like nice canvas. It's convex. It's dry. It's not sunken. It's not pierced. We know that top photo, healthy brood, not a lot of misses. We don't see a shotgun brood pattern. Whereas the bottom photo, we do see the brown, soupy looking larva, the pierced cappings. And you can see here over on the end, you can see that it looks the telltale sign of that larva. Same thing, good brood pattern. The capping is what you want to make sure you know the difference between honey capping, brood capping, and know the difference and know what looks good and what's not. And then that ropiness. So anything that sticks to your little stick. So I'll stop here actually. And is there any questions on the AFB talk before I change over to the dogs.
Yes, I have a question.
Okay.
Can you tell me what looks similar in the hive to AFB, but is not in terms of the symptoms or in terms of what you're actually seeing?
So, BPMS, parasitic mite syndrome, has lots of different symptoms. Sometimes it looks like AFB. Sometimes it looks like EFB. Sometimes we call that idiopathic brood disease. Sometimes we call it snot brood. And the reason why I say, you know, we see it, we're like, oh, this looks like AFB. Doesn't really smell like AFB, but it looks like it's a pierced capping. It's already in starting the pupa stage. Huh, this is weird. It's not really ropey. It's not really smelly. Take a sample, send it to the lab, negative. Same with EFB. There are BPMS, you know, parasitic mite syndrome. There are things that, oh, this is EFB. It's in the C stage. It's starting to go khaki. We know, you know, we take samples and swab it, send it to the lab. It's not. So those there are things that mimic it that look similar, and it means it's dying at the same life stage. So the telltale sign for the AFB is it starts to die in that pre-pupal stage when the capping is already there. Almost all of everything that looks like this kind of falls into the category of the parasitic mite syndrome. So chalk brood, sac brood, any of the other brood diseases look totally different. You would never confuse them. But BPMS can be confused for AFB and EFB.
But the only way to really determine is to have the sample processed by a lab.
Exactly. Yes. Well, yes, I would say it must be processed at the lab for confirmation. I'm pretty good in the field with the smell. I mean, I have had enough experience that I feel pretty confident with it, but I always follow up with samples to the lab because ultimately, if it is AFB, it will have to be burned. So I don't want the beekeeper to lose out on money because of what I think it is, just that alone. I make sure that the Beltsville Bee Lab, the USDA APHIS Bee Lab, says yes or no, because there are times when that it looks very similar, and I could swear to it that, oh man, I really thought that was AFB, but it wasn't. It came back negative. So usually, if I'm really certain, I'll go out, I'll do a re-inspection, and I'll check because we put under quarantine. Nobody can move out of this apiary. I'll do a second sample, and if it comes back negative, you know, I accept that I'm wrong, and I'm glad we checked because I would have had to make them burn it, and it wasn't there.
And how do you send the sample?
So if you email me, I can send you the link to the bee lab with the sample protocols. And it's not just Beltsville Bee Lab. Utah has a lab. I do believe, I'm not sure if UC Davis takes samples, but I know Utah does. I think South Dakota does as well, maybe Louisiana. But the Beltsville Bee Lab, actually, if you just type in USDA APHIS Beltsville Bee Lab, the lab comes up on Google, their webpage, and they have a whole page on how to send samples.
Cybil, are they open right now?
Yes, they are. They are open for swab samples only.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Cybil, this is Phil. How do you determine if you have a long since dead out hive? Right, there's been no activity in this thing for 6 months, and it's pretty much dried up. Right, there's not going to be any ropiness, you know. But is there any telltale signs of a very quiet old dead out?
Scale. You know,
Okay.
the scale, looking in the comb for scale. Depending on the age of the comb, I would say, you know, if this is a dead out, or if this was put in a shed and it's over 5 years, get some new frames. And, you know, if you don't know what it died from, or you can't tell, the only way of knowing whether there's AFB in this frame is to put bees on it. and once the warmth of the bees, you know, the make those spores active, once they reach that temperature, they're in fruition right there. They're back. So to me, it's not worth you're sparing, you know, you're going to lose your bees, you're going to lose all the frames. So, you know, a handful of frames from a dead out, if you are not certain, you know, that if they're brown, dark brown frames, they're old and you can't tell if there's scale in there, let them go. And you know, maybe start fresh, or scrape them down. If they're plastic, try scraping them down, re-waxing them. You know, that's sketchy a little. Scrubbing them with lye, you can. It doesn't kill the spore. So there's that chance of the spore getting into the gut of that larva. It's a small chance, but so that's up to you. But the only way to really tell is to put bees on it and let it get warm. You know,
the ARS website is posted in the chat.
Yay, thank you. Somebody who's technologically inclined. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So, okay.
Cybil,
yes?
do you have any really good pictures? I haven't seen anything that I could definitely point out and say that's scale. Do you have any good pictures of scale by itself? I saw some pictures of, you know, cells that you said were scale, but I couldn't really identify it.
Okay, so the one I have here, that is right here. So see this right here.
Okay.
Each of those, those are scales. And so when I say scale, I just mean that it is a dead larva that is stuck to right here. Each of these, now again, this is looking down into the bottom of the cell. So the larva was laying in that cell like this, and then it just died into the bottom of the cell. And once it died, you still see that shape, the shape of what looks like a fish scale. And you can see every one of these is a cell. It's shiny. It looks kind of shiny, iridescent a little. It's blackish with an iridescence to it, and they are hard to remove.
So that's a dried up larva, basically.
Yes.
Dead larva.
It is a dead larva, and it looks in the shape of a fish scale.
I see.
So the dead larva that's stuck to the bottom of its own cell. Yeah, and this is a lot of them. This is a frame that's saturated with them.
Is it always like a little bit shiny? It looks like it's kind of shiny in there.
Yes, yes, it does have an iridescence to it.
Okay.
Any more questions?
How about UV light, UV flashlight to what color?
I have read that it does pick up, but I've never tried that. I have read that you can shine a UV on it and it does shine, but that's just some research. But I would try it. I'm always, you know, up for trying whatever. It's something new. If you had that type of light, yes, try it.
I've got a question. A lot of what we have learned over the years is, you know, looking for it, finding it, destroying it. Any work, I know the Finns, for example, had some success or claiming some success using probiotics to enhance bee immunity in some way, shape, or form. Is any work or money being thrown at that kind of research? I mean, it seems right now we have a disease. We have one way of taking care of it, which is destruction of the hives and destruction of the frames, but how much energy is being put into the science of bee immunity in order to thwart this before it happens. I mean, it's one thing to be hygienic as a beekeeper and, cleaning your tools and not using old equipment and that sort of thing, but bees still drift. And so anyway, I'm just sort of wondering about that, if any.
So George, is that you speaking? Okay. So George, you hush your mouth, because if they come up with good, healthy microbes, I'm out of a job. No, I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm just teasing. No, they are doing great things. There is a new product out that actually suppresses the American foul brood. I don't know enough on it, but I do know if it comes round that it will solve a lot of commercial beekeeping problems. So, and I would rather, personally, I would rather see microbes than antibiotics. So I welcome it. I'm sorry, I don't know a lot about it, other than it is out there and it is already on the market. So I do have a few beekeepers who are beginning to inquiries about getting it and trying it. So that's as far as I know, and I welcome it.
Cybil, this is Jim. So
yes.
Is it in the U.S. or is it in other countries?
Oh no, it's here. Mm-hmm.
It's here?
I can get it here. Yep.
Jim, there was some work that was trying to be done a few years back with somebody at UC Davis, and apparently either they ran out of funding or she couldn't acquire the funding.
Yeah.
But working with a product called Biosa, which was some proprietary I think predominantly, lactobacillus and some other beneficial bacteria, which had, at least the idea was that what they were doing were outcompeting the foul brood bacteria in the bee larva, so that the foul brood bacteria couldn't gain a foothold on the larva. At least that's what they were attempting to establish anyway. Yes. But apparently the Finns had some luck, and now I think companies like Man Lake are selling these, quote, probiotic, quote, substances without making claims, but at least there is some evidence.
There are microbes out there that they're saying, like Pro Health and all that stuff. That's all fine, but there is one specific company, and I'm sorry it escapes me, that does have something, and they do have the claim that it is the probiotic that suppresses the penibacillus in the midgut.
Right.
So there is a product out there, and it is here, and it is available for purchase. So I wish them all the best, although it will put me my dog's out of business. No, I'm kidding.
We'll find you work. Don't worry.
It sounds to me like that's just hiding it. It's not really.
No, it's not hiding it. It's it's not allowing the larva to succumb to that bacteria in that small window of time.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't hide it, and then it comes back later. It just doesn't allow it to affect that larva in that little 3-day window.
In that window, yeah. It was something to do. They don't apparently eat. From what I read, bees and insects have a different immune type response system, different than like mammals and so forth, and so they don't develop an immune response, but something else. It was something else, yeah. But it was really pretty encouraging somehow. So I just wanted to know, like, how much
that I don't know about the research on it, but I do know it's out there, and that at least it is on the market. It is no longer in the research stage. And at the last conference I went to, they were selling it. So very cool. It's there.
And do you know what its efficacy is? Is it good?
Nope, I don't know anything on it yet. I don't actually know anyone who's used it yet. So,
Oh, but the second you stop using it, it comes back in full force?
No, that's antibiotic. The antibiotic just suppresses the spore until you stop using it. This actually, it does something to the larval gut to keep the cells in the larval gut from allowing the bacteria to break through.
Is it strong microbials?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
microbials. It's not an antibiotic.
Yeah.
No, it's the name of the company, Strong Microbial.
Oh, it is. You're right. It is.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
the name. Thanks, Jim. I couldn't remember the name. I couldn't remember. Yeah, there were
Google.
two, and it was something that they stumbled on. I think it was these two Finnish
Yes.
researchers who just sort of they weren't deliberately going out to try and find this. They just kind of like fell on it. Went, oh my God, it's actually having this effect, and let's look more into it or something. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, what do you know about the milk test? Is that a reliable test?
Sure. It's reliable if you're doing it in your backyard and you're not sure and you want to try it, then yes. But reliable for me to say you're gonna have to burn your frames, no. Mm-mm.
No,
No.
what I'm yeah, okay.
I mean, just for the average person, if you were like, hey, this kind of looks like AFB, I'm going to try this milk test. Yes, then I would say that would be something you could try, but it wouldn't be something that I would do. I would not have any
Faith?
I wouldn't have confidence in that at all.
Really?
No.
So basically, you're saying it's not really worth it.
I mean, I've seen some, not research, but I've seen some people who have used it and sent samples to the lab and, oh, look, this is what happened. And it said that I have AFB and the lab confirmed it's AFB, but I wouldn't put my faith in that.
Budgie. Let me get your budgie.
Okay, so are we ready to move on? Okay. So here in Maryland, we have the notoriety of having the Canine AFB scent detector dogs. So again, some dogs fetch, roll over. We were talking earlier about our, oh no, I guess that was our conversation earlier today. Our dogs sniff out the scent of American foul brood bacteria. The dead larva is exactly what they scent out. So other dogs can scent drugs, paraphernalia that in the jail, in the correctional facility, gunpowder, things like that. My dogs are just slightly more unusual. They are trained to find and alert me the presence of American foul brood. They can inspect. I'm going to be conservative and say 100 honeybee colonies in 10 minutes. And it would take me a whole day. I don't think I could get 50. I don't think I could open 50 colonies and inspect 50 colonies in one whole day, a whole work day. So far more than the humans can inspect. Mac is a yellow lab. He's 6.5. Tuca is a 4-year-old Springer Spaniel. They are the 5th and 6th bee dogs we've had here in Maryland. So our department started in the mid-'80s with training dogs to detect American foul brood, vegetative and spore state. Their work days consist of walking through rows of commercial beehives and sniffing, wagging their tails. They have a great time. They love to work. When they smell American foul brood, they alert me in different ways. Max starts to salivate. He sits. He's very quiet and calm. He's an extremely laid-back dog. And Tuca gets super excited. He's already super excited as soon as he opens his eyes, but even more excited. And he paws at the hive and jumps around and it acts like a nut. So it's totally different, and we train totally different because that's just, you can't train every dog the same. We only use the dog for disease detection when the bees are not flying. Again, when the bees are not flying. So when the bees are dormant and in cluster, which is typically below 52 degrees, we utilize the dogs for inspection. We do have some honeybees that that are active at the landing board a little less than 50 degrees, and the dogs do shy away from that. They're not dumb. They know what it's all about. My dogs do not wear bee suits. We only use them when it is cold. So my dogs work from, say, mid-November to about the first week of March. And they're on vacation from the middle of March through Halloween. And then we train off and on all summer, but they sleep on the couch and they swim in the pool every day. So it's not really that effective to have them, but I'll tell you a little bit later why we do have them. So in the early 80s, we became the first state to get a bee dog or train a bee dog. And mainly because our goal was to keep the number of infected colonies low. I start to freak out when it gets close to 10. I want to have less than 10 across the state. When I took over, we were having a bad year and we had found 13 cases, and that was the most we've had, and I was very upset over that. So we also have dogs, that work at the airport, the Beagle Brigade. We have one's emerald ash borer, the exotic beetle whose larva feeds on the inner bark of the ash tree. There was a beagle that was able to detect that as well. Bless you, whoever sneezed. Mac, Tuca, and I were trained and certified by the Maryland Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. That is the officers at our correctional facilities have their own dog certification program, canine certification. So they train dogs all over the state there. So different police departments, we work with the correctional services. They regularly test us. You got to pass so many tests per year to make sure you are alerting on what you're supposed to be alerting on. In our boot camp, we worked with, there was another Springer Spaniel that she can find, her name is Gigi, sweetest little dog. She can find a cell phone. Lithium ion battery is what she is trained to find, because that is contraband in the correctional facility. So she goes through, when people come in to visit, she searches their belongings. She searches the jail cells because cell phones are not allowed there. So not just drug detectors, there are other things that the dogs are trained on as well. Tuca, the Springer Spaniel, came from the correctional facility. They gifted him to me. He had been trained on marijuana and Suboxone, which is a synthetic methadone. So he was already trained on 2 of the drugs, and then they were releasing him from training because he has some environmental issues, and that meaning he cowers at loud noises. So for us, we work outside, we work in the quiet, it's just us. He works like a champ for me. And again, that is because it's outside. But a thunderstorm comes, he's up your shirt. Okay, so we were trained and certified on the American foul brood scent only, because that is the only disease that is regulated. So there are laws stating, Maryland law states, this is a contagious bacteria. Once found, it is quarantined. It may not move until it is eradicated. Hives with suspect AFB are sedentary until the confirmation from USDA. So once
No, that's clean, honey. No.
Sorry, is that a question or no? Okay. So we routinely go through a series of games, routines, drills to stay current with the scent detection. And most of that for us, unfortunately, is we can't train on our scent outside. So because handling American foul brood is very scary. I don't want to infect. I have 40 colonies here on our farm. I don't want to infect myself. So we train indoors. But most of our training is training to make sure they'll do what I'm asking them to do. Will they go up? And then I'll show you in a minute why I need them to be able to get up on a tractor or able to get up on this table, dig in the snow. We routinely do these drills. And again, I didn't come up with all of this protocol. It's the Correctional Service, the Maryland Department of Public Safety and Correctional Service. It's their protocol with their department. They train us to train our dogs, and they train our dogs to train us as well. So this year, Mac and Tuca started in November of 2019 inspecting colonies for a commercial operation that was ready to go to California for almonds. They were able to inspect 2,000 of those colonies by December 3rd. They love it. They love going out there. This gentleman uses a staging yard, so all the colonies come to one spot. I drive to one spot, and we run rows of colonies. It's awesome. These are double palletized so that the top pallet can go on the truck. We also look for spotted lanternfly, bagworms, fire ants. I have to look for those other things. The dogs don't. But while we're there, so the pallets that are coming out to California are clean pallets. He does the double pallet. And you can see here on occasion when I don't get out there quick enough and they start to band and palletize them, we've had to have the dogs go across, and go up to the second row to inspect. So, and that's my bad. That's on me to not keep ahead of it and keep good communication with the beekeeper. That is my job. So you can see Mac there is the yellow lab, and Tuca is the Springer Spaniel. Tuca is scenting the bottom pallet there, and they kind of just scent everything. And oops, go back. There we go. There's a little video of him. This is him working. He likes to go dart in between some of the pallets. This is Mac working. Mac, he's slower and more methodical. These were hives that were already insulated, and they were being moved into Washington, D.C., and they were getting ready for moving, and they had their equipment piled out there, so I had him scent the equipment. We don't certify equipment because without bees on it, if it's just a scale, we don't. But I had him, he was pretty interested in smelling it, but no alerts on that. And this bottom photo is here on our farm, and we were trying out the new jackets. And that may sound funny, but I want to make sure they're comfortable in their harness, in their leash, in their jacket. I want to make sure that they're comfortable. So when I get out there and I ask them to search, that they're not like, what is this? What am I wearing? And they're not comfortable, and they're not listening to me or not doing their job. If their focus comes away from what they're supposed to be doing, I'm certifying colonies that we don't know what's in them. So I have to trust that they know what I'm asking them to do, and I need them to be as comfortable as possible, or I need them to be at their normal. I don't need them to be stressed out over anything. So again, this was just us trying the jackets and making sure that they were all, okay with wearing them and not uncomfortable. And this is our friend, is Governor Larry Hogan. We love our governor. And he stops by. We go out and we do PR. We go out and we do educational things. teaching that the dogs, what the dogs do. Most of it we do meet and greets everywhere. And the gentleman in the left picture to the right behind my shoulder is our Secretary of Agriculture, Joe Bartenfelder, and they're big fans of the dogs. And Mac won the governor of the state of Maryland issued us the service award for what we do to help honeybees. So we were at the state fair here last year, and the governor stopped by and saw us and stopped and took some pictures with us. He's a great governor, and he also, he promotes agriculture. So does the secretary. They're great promoters of bees and pollinators and what we do, and they acknowledge it. And that to me, that just makes it worth it. That somebody knows we care, and somebody knows we are trying to do our job to the best of our ability. So I think that is the end of my talk. You can see there my information. And I added the information for Patricia Bowles. That's the California Bee Safe Program Specialist. That's the only contact I know in California. So there are others. It's just I'm not familiar with them. So, and you can, if you take a screenshot or whatnot of that information, if not, if you email me, I can send you links and things. But I have spoken to Patricia in our inspectors meeting. She's very nice, and I have emailed her a little bit back and forth, and she's a very knowledgeable, very nice lady. So, any questions?
That's great. How much did you say? How much the how much? God, don't know how to put this. The monetary aspect of beekeeping in Maryland. It's valuable, but I mean, what is it like? Hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, how much money is generated by beekeeping in Maryland?
Wow, I have no idea. I would have to say we're probably in the 100 million, I would have to say, for as much agriculture that we have here. Our commercial beekeepers go from apples to go out to the eastern shore for all the cucumbers, watermelons, cantaloupes.
Because you got also like Western Maryland, which gets into some pretty,
we have a lot of orchards.
Or, a whole different kind of climate out there, different kind of agriculture. So this is so important for you guys.
Mm-hmm. It's for our little state. We are a tiny state, but we have a lot of agriculture, and we have a lot of bee interest. We have a lot of new up and coming, like orchards that are growing, orchard/vineyard, although I know bees don't work vineyards, but we're seeing these little crossover microbreweries where they have hops, where they have they're growing apples because they're doing cider. They also have grapes, and they're doing a mix. So those types of places. Also hemp is really becoming really big, and I don't know how that's going to affect the bees, but people want it to be hand in hand, bees and hemp, but we're not seeing it right now. But for those other small farms, are popping up small agriculture niches, where they're making mead. They want the products of the hive. They want the hops grown all right there. It's interesting. It's a very interesting state.
Very cool. Is your governor a beekeeper yet?
No, he isn't. There are bees at the state house. Oh, somebody.
Yeah, hang on. Al, I'm muting you're echoing.
Yeah. So there are bees at the governor's house, the state house, and then the secretary also has bees on his farm. So they're pro-bee, they're just not beekeepers yet.
Very cool.
Hey, Cybil, I have a question
Yes.
about the dogs. So say there was a corridor of streets, maybe a 3-mile long stretch, and maybe as much as 5 blocks or 10 blocks either way of that 3-mile stretch of road, where you thought there were we have a corridor where AFB has been showing up along in Berkeley, and kind of wanted to know if dogs could help us. Would we have to know like where the registered apiaries of each backyard? And I mean, how could we use dogs to maybe locate problematic areas in a known, I mean, we know, locations of where things have cropped up over the past 4 and 6 years.
So here, I mean, let's just start with the area. Penibacillus larva is actually found in nature. So you could find it out in the ground, puddles, you could find it in areas. And so when I first started beekeeping and I had that AFB, I had it crop up. I had it pop up here and there. It would just pop up in the same area. Every once in a while I'd get some, and I was like, okay, what am I doing wrong here? Because I felt like I kept eradicating anything I was finding. I moved the location. I moved the apiary on the farm from one side of the farm to the other. And knock on wood, I'm going to find some wood. Knock on wood, that eliminated that part of the issue. So, one, it can be in the area. You can have a pocket of AFB in your natural area, in the environment. 2, you also, when we start finding it, we typically see it continually in the same beekeepers that are not eradicating frames or are bringing frames out of the barn that have been in storage for a long time, and they're bringing out old equipment. And that's the second place we're seeing the highest amount is from, or actually the first place we're seeing the highest amount is from, somebody has a stash of equipment, they're bringing it out, it comes to fruition, and then we have it again. And then the second the second time we see the most is in these pockets of, I can't figure out where it's coming from. But I was out on a farm once, and I was like, okay, this is the 4th time we've found it here. Let's kind of circle out, where are we getting this from? And there was a barn off to the left. It didn't look like it was on their property, but it was their barn. And the bees were going in and robbing out old crap. And they were also bringing out some frames. So we went over and looked, and because I was throwing out, here's what it could be. And they were like, oh yeah, well we went over there. He pulled the doors open. They weren't sealed doors. The bees could clearly get through. And he's like, oh, every once in a while I need a bottom board. Every once in a while I need to come get them. So that being said, that's typically where you need to stop those from happening first. The dogs could be helpful, but again, you would need to have below 50 degrees. I don't know that you all have that
no.
on a regular basis.
Maybe before 7 in the morning.
Yeah. So, you'd have to have, the circumstances of that. Also, in order for you all, and I have talked with Jim and I'm sorry, what was
Ron.
the other? Ron. I'm sorry, Ron Carter. There you go. I got it. About this before, for us, because we regulate AFB, the trained dog has to come from us. You couldn't have a civilian entity have a trained dog because one, they wouldn't be allowed on the beekeeper's property, because nobody has access to the database of where these beekeepers are, because that's confidential. You know, to be able to go out, to go out and inspect, I have that list. I'm able to go out and run the dogs through. It would be a little problematic for the liability of taking a civilian taking a dog onto someone else's property, or having the acceptance of that.
So just, you said it was, in the beginning, you said it was in nature. So would dogs be able to find the non-beekeeping equipment source of it?
Sort of. So I've had Mac not alert, but Mac has been extremely interested in the, like I said, that beekeeping rack, that rack where I had that colony, the colonies there that had AFB. The rack is now gone, but where it is on the edge of a stone road going to a new barn. And he loves that area. He searches that area, and I feel like there's something there that he knows, but he does not alert as vegetative foul brood. So he doesn't ever give me the alert and sit and say, hey, something's here. But he takes, and the exact row where that rack was, his nose is to the ground almost every time we go by there. So,
have you found a correlation with any feral colonies, bee trees? Ever?
Bee trees here are pretty rare. So,
and the dogs would have to get up, right?
Yeah, I've never had anything like that. I've never had any, the dogs have never alerted on anything out like that. Like, you know what I mean? Gone to a tree where a dead out colony was, or I've never had anything like that. I don't know that they would take it upon themselves to go do that. It's typically, I ask them to search and I give them a search area. So
it's amazing that you've never had a dog go to a tree, because I think that's a natural thing, isn't it?
That's a good one.
So, Cybil, how close do the dogs have to get to the colony? Do they basically get their nose into the entrance, or can they get a couple of feet away?
I typically run them 6 inches to a foot. That's my natural instinct, is to have them between the colonies and me, and I'm typically they stand to my left, and I stand there between me and the colony, and I usually kind of trot along the front of the colonies, but Tuca will jut between, and I feel comfortable that they can scent within, let's say, 4 foot. More with screen bottom boards. I feel like these screen bottom boards have made it a little nicer for them to not have to be right in the front, and it's really a trust issue. I just have to trust that they're doing what that I'm asking them to do. But I can kind of tell when they're losing interest, or when they're getting bored, we have to go do something else for a while. But I usually keep them within 6 inches to a foot away. That's the space I give them. And they can find, our smallest training aid is the size of between a quarter and a 50-cent piece of comb with vegetative foul brood on it.
Have they ever been wrong?
Not yet, knock on wood. They've never missed on when we hide the aids, the training aids. They've never missed on an alert, if they've alerted on every one. And then every time they have alerted in the field, we follow up with the USDA APHIS lab, and it has been a positive. So, thankfully.
Very impressive.
It is, and you have to remember though, the small amount. And so for the one so there's several commercial beekeepers. The one specifically that goes to California, he moves the most. So we make sure we get him done every year. When he comes back from California, he goes to the shore with the majority of his bees on cucumbers, melons, and you name it. So 2 of my inspectors are all, not that they're dedicated to him, but they spend a good portion of their summer opening colonies to spot check the dogs. Because you've got to have, somebody's got to be following up. And of course, the commercial beekeepers, if they have foul brood, they're losing their business. They need to know. They need to not rely on me to catch it. They need to have this already, taken care of. So shame on them if actually they're waiting for me to let them know if they have it or not. So I'm not their bee manager. They are. They need to make sure they're taking care of all of that. I'm just doing my job to make sure they can make money. They can move. They can get into their pollination contracts legally. So I don't know where I was going with that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Cybil, I have a question. What's the life expectancy of the skill set for a dog?
So in the past, the dogs have worked from, say, age of 2 to age of 8, 9 tops. So I when I trained Mac, started training Mac, he was 2, and they told me, that if I wasn't so persistent, they would have wanted me to get a younger dog, but my husband said no more dogs, so I couldn't get another dog. But they typically would not have started training at age 2. They would have wanted to start at age 1 and start him working at age 2. For them at the correctional facility. I mean, it's a little different for me, but by age of 8 or 9, typically they, you don't want to be pushing them, say, with joint issues or whatnot. Obviously, if they're healthy and they want to keep working, they can keep working as long as you have confidence that they're doing what you're asking them to do.
And 9 to 12 are their retirement years.
Yeah, I'd have to say I wouldn't push Mac to work probably past 10, because I want him to be able to, relax and, hang out at the pool more.
Okay, one question from an old guy. Had a small commercial operation in the 80s and the 90s, and AFB was just a huge problem. And here we are in 2020, and it is a problem, and indeed it is serious, but it seems to have less of an impact on both the commercial people and the home people. And I know that some of the commercial people treat prophylactically, but I just have to think that the bees have somehow developed an immunity or a way to deal with the issue. And I'd love to have your thoughts on that.
So I think maybe they are genetically a little better, but I think most of it is better beekeeping practices. One, more education. 100%. There's a lot more education now than there was even when I started back in the 90s. So I feel like education is one, and the internet is also another one. Beekeepers are educating themselves, and I think there's enough other issues, BPMS, viruses, Varroa. There's enough other issues that environmental issues, chemicals building up in the comb. I feel like beekeepers are more aware, and they're culling out frames and not allowing that to be, getting established and being in the colony for very long. I feel like that's a good beekeeping practices is probably the largest part of why we don't see it as much anymore. And again, people are more aware. Hey, there's chemicals in my environment. It's building up in my wax. It's in the pollen. Frames are pollen bound. We get pollen bound frames here, and here we have tons of pollen here in Maryland. So people are pulling them out, they're scraping them down, or if they're using foundation, they're cutting it out. They're putting fresh foundation in there. I feel like that is probably the biggest part of why we're not seeing it as much. And we'll see for the next couple years. Now that terrapatties and tetracycline is becoming harder to get because you need a veterinary feed directive. You know, we'll see. We'll see if in the next 4 or 5 years it doesn't get a little worse, or actually 2 or 3 years it doesn't get a little worse. But I feel like the practices the beekeepers are doing is key.
You know, those issues really impact the home, you know, backyard beekeepers, but there's a less of an impact for the commercial guys because they're buying things in larger quantities, and those things are available on the international market. And I hate to say it, but and I think Tactic is a really good example of that. You know, that stuff's available, and even though in some states it's not you know, a recommended treatment or a permitted treatment, it still is going on. And I'm wondering if tetracycline is among those. I see it advertised in my local Craigslist ads on a regular basis. So, you know, it's a mystery to me. Are people still doing it prophylactically, or are we really seeing the bees being able to handle it, and which is what we hope for the mites, of course.
It's hard to say. We had a small beekeeper who had been using it religiously, and that was the samples that you saw earlier in the talk was those samples that he started coming down with it because he couldn't get them. And then he found some. And so halfway through my inspections, I'm starting to see terrapatties on the top bars of the frames. So he was then quarantined again, and we had to wait for those terrapatties to clear. So 30 days later, we go back out, and guess what? AFB's right back. So I think the prophylactic use of them is just not, it's, for this guy who didn't have the availability, this is exactly why we think that it's going to rear its ugly head for a little while until we can get rid of it. So we'll see. I don't, you know, it's hard for me to pinpoint. When I'm out inspecting colonies and I see unregulated use products that are not allowable for use, you know, I don't have the ability to find them, but I have the ability to bring our pesticide guys in to find them. But, you know, it's my biggest goal is to work with the beekeeper and educate the beekeeper on what we can do to alleviate those issues. You know, good communication between the beekeeper and the bee inspector is what we try to promote.
Is there anything in Maryland law about wax dipping or about irradiation with gamma ray, cobalt-60 sources?
So we don't have any facilities here that do irradiation. There is one in Jersey and one in Philly. But moving those frames from Maryland to Philly and Maryland to Jersey is, woo, pretty hard because, again, this is a quarantine product that's not allowed to cross state lines. So we have to have a lot of permits in place, a lot of shrink wrap in place. It's got to go from inside, you know, be inspected, wrapped, driven straight to be put right inside because we don't want the spread of this. So it is allowed. The irradiation is allowed here. But we don't have our facility here in Maryland.
What sort of facilities are they? Are they like food irradiation or
I guess so.
Industrial?
Yeah, warehouse. And my guess would be that it's like shipments that come from international shipments that are irradiated before they're packaged or something. I don't know, but I know I've seen photos, and it's photographs, and they're taking the equipment in on pallets that are fully shrink wrapped into like a warehouse. So I'm assuming that it's some type of maybe grain irradiation facility. I'm not sure. And what was the first part of your question?
Oh, wax dipping of infected equipment to sterilize it or purify it.
I've not, that's not something that I have seen regularly. I mean, it's not.
I've read about it.
Yeah, I think it would be a possibility, like on a plastic frame or on a wooden frame. You mean to dip the whole thing?
Well, I think it's more commonly done with boxes, bottom boards, top covers, inner covers.
Yeah, the weather treatment stuff, you know, the treating of a hive initially.
Well, I'm assuming that where I read about it, they were talking about taking hives that had been found to be infested with AFB, running them through the dipping operation, and when they came out, there would not be detectable AFB on them, nor would they cause an outbreak of AFB in the futhere because they had been.
I guess the spores. So wood is porous. So if there had been scale inside the colony, then there could be spore on the surface of the wood, and wood is porous, so it could be in the surface of the wood. The chance of a bee licking the surface of the hive body to then take that back to mix bee bread and feed to a less than 3 day old larva is pretty slim. But I can see the point there of dipping it in wax kind of would encase it, so that would totally alleviate the bee being able to take anything from the surface, whether it was through its mouth parts or through its feet. It would not be able to transfer that spore. So I mean, I can see the point. It's that I would allow it here if somebody wanted to try it. I don't if it's in vegetative state, I don't make them burn. I only make them burn the frames that the vegetative state is on. If it has not gone to spore, we salvage all the woodenware. So typically I ask them to take it down if it's a struggling colony anyway, and we're getting rid of some vegetative state, and we're going to condense them down, maybe try to put them on fresh foundation like a shook swarm. We'll put them on, hey, let's try to get them into a nuke box so that if this really is an issue, we'll get rid of burn the frames that have the vegetative state, and then we'll kind of condense them down so that we're not losing so much. So we'll see how that goes and monitor that smaller amount. And it really is, I try to salvage as much as I can. We do not want to burn everybody's colonies.
Yeah, Cybil, what Jerry's referring to, I actually do it for weatherproofing boxes. We use a paraffin and pine tar rosin mix in a tank. We do it at 300 degrees.
She's in Maryland, so we let
it
her
was
go.
hot enough to kill spore.
You told me. How'd it go?
So the only proven way to kill a spore is fire.
Asking her question. Yeah.
So I don't know that 300 degrees would be enough.
Right.
But so you're saying it encases it?
No, I don't do it at all. I do it for weatherproofing. I do it instead of painting. So I don't do it for any treatment. I do it just to protect the wood from the weather.
But no, I'm just meaning whether you do it for weatherproofing or whether you would do it for foulbrood. So I'm just trying to get a picture. You take the entire woodenware, you dip it, and it's like encased.
Yeah, so we dip it in, it stays under for 10 minutes in 300 degree wax. When you put, Ron, do you have any pictures on your system that you could show?
No, I don't have pictures.
But so yeah, then we pull it back up, and it then the wax basically, as it cools, gets sucked into the wood.
Okay. Hey, I think it would be worth a try.
We do it because I hate painting.
Oh, come on, Jim. I have every color under the rainbow out in my yard. I love all the different colors.
Actually, Jim, I do. I could probably.
Yeah, just put it up to the camera. You might be able to see it.
I can pull it up too. Okay.
So that's our dipping tank, and that's the top box is just holding the boxes below it under the wax.
Under, okay.
Yeah, and so that wax is a paraffin, it's a pine tar rosin and paraffin mixture.
Okay. I've not heard of it before as a treatment for AFB or a treatment for and so they look okay. That's nice.
Yeah, again, we don't use it for a treatment for anything except for just trying to preserve the wood.
How many pounds of paraffin does it take to fill the tank?
I don't know. It's a lot. That tank,
I would think that it would be.
yeah, that tank weighs a lot.
Wow. Okay.
It takes us about a day to heat it up.
Okay, so I'm looking in the chat. Did anyone else have any questions? No?
All right. Cybil, I really do appreciate you staying up so late for us. That was fantastic.
I have to be up in 4 hours. No.
Really good presentation. Really do appreciate it. That was phenomenal. And
No problem. No problem.
Yes, Cybil, I echo what Jim is saying. Thank you again for all your efforts in preparation, and so thank you very much.
No
Yes,
problem.
thank you. Thank you so much. It was a great talk.